Welcome everyone to our final session of our first day of the Embark Canine Health Summit, which is also our first panel discussion, which is titled The Science of Canine Wellness and Longevity Reimagined. So please join me in welcoming our moderator for this panel, Embark's founder and CEO, Ryan Boyko. Welcome,
Thanks,
Ryan.
John. Looking forward to a great discussion with a bunch of great panelists. And we're also taking questions from the audience, so you can leave a question and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can.
That's right.
But before we do that, I'd love to allow the panelists a chance to introduce themselves, who they are, how they got to where they're at now, and what their companies do. So first, I'd love to start with Celine. I'm gonna mispronounce your last name if I try. I'll have to say Celine.
Ryan, just to tell you, I'm gonna leave you to it. That was my introduction, and have a great session. I'll see you at the end.
All right, great, thank you. The CEO and founder of Loyal, doing really great things with aging. So, good way. Uh-oh, I think she's muted. No. Technical difficulties. Well, while we try to solve that, so Christina Kelly Lopes, the CEO and founder of Phytocure, is here, and so maybe she can start, and then we'll jump back to Celine.
A pleasure. Greetings, everybody. Thank you, folks from Embark, to having us here. I'm Christina Lopes, co-founder and CEO of One Health. Our key product is Phytocure. It's the first precision medicine product for dogs with cancer. As you probably know, or maybe not, cancer is the #1 disease killer of dogs. So 1 in 3, about 6 million diagnosed last year. A very high unmet need, vast unmet need. So what we do is we translate what's been validated, FDA approved for humans, that was probably tested on our beloved dogs, and leverage those data and those tools in order to now help our four-legged family members live better and healthier lives. We believe precision health is critical, and they're bringing the tools for that. I'm from Brazil originally, came to the US as a single mother, so I've really kind of been very mission and know what it is to make it against the odds. We're proud to be backed by, we did Y Combinator, we have Andreessen Horowitz as backers, and a few others, really fantastic capital partners. And so, yeah, happy to chat about any of those topics.
Thank you, Christina, and thanks for your time and joining the panel today. Should we go to Celine now? The message
I think you should. Is that okay?
Great. Yes.
Okay, awesome. I'm sorry. It's actually a meme at my company that I'm always the victim/cause of technical difficulties. So I'm glad, I'm bringing this core cultural value to this panel. But yeah, I'm Celine Hollywood. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Loyal. We're developing drugs intended to extend canine health span and lifespan, so quality of life and numbers of years of life too. And really kind of our meta goal as a company, in addition to obviously, hopefully bringing forward pharmaceuticals that will help pet parents have more time with their pets, it's also to better understand the aging process in general. Aging is a very complex, multivariate, variable process depending from individual, animal, environment, breed to breed. And it's not very well characterized in basically anything but very lower model organisms. So we're excited to both hopefully help pet parents and help the broader community by contributing to the bed of knowledge that we have about aging, and obviously augmenting a lot of the work that Embark and the rest of the community has done. And maybe the last thing that's important to know is we're also really excited about this idea of building a pharma brand that's beloved, which is helpful for selling products, obviously, but more exciting to build an excitement around working on deeply technical, impactful problems like the ones that we're working on to facilitate more entrepreneurship in this area and less people being scared of pharma and healthcare and medicine in general. So that's us.
Great. Thank you. Ben Lewis was a co-founder of One Health.
Hi, it's an honor to be on the call today with everyone on the conference. I'm Ben. I'm one of the co-founders of One Health Company, along with Christina. By background, I went to veterinary school. I then went to business school, and I've always been interested in not only the pure veterinary genetics as they apply to dogs, but also how they apply to humans as well. And we started One Health Company to really help both two-legged as well as four-legged species. And more recently, I became CEO of a really cool company, but we're in stealth and I can't talk about it. But I'm honored to be on here, and I love talking about PhytoCure. I love talking about One Health, and I love being on panels with incredibly intelligent people to discuss wellness and longevity in our four-legged family members.
Ben is our resident Elon Musk on the call with the cryptic messaging.
I didn't buy Twitter.
Yeah.
I don't know. Is Elon cryptic about anything? I think he's like almost too forthcoming.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And the last panelist is Robin Smith, who is a senior director of product here at Embark, and also spent about 6 years at 23andMe earlier in his career.
Hi, welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So I lead two areas at Embark. One is our science discovery platform. The other is new product development. As Ryan said, I've been a DNA enthusiast for the past 20 years or so. I was a scientist for 10 years, and then I was at 23andMe for another 6. So been working in this space for a while. I'm really most excited about the discoveries that we're going to be able to make with this unprecedented database that we've put together. We've got over 1 million dogs now. We're starting to build tools, like a platform that can produce high quality genetic associations at scale. One of the fruits of that is our recent discovery in Rhodesian ridgebacks on early onset deafness, and I think that's just the tip of the iceberg. I think you'll see a lot more coming out of our groups. And then on the other side, I think that all that discovery is going to be fueling a bunch of new products for Embark, which will be really exciting.
Yes, well, thank you, Robin, and thank you to all the panelists for taking time to answer my questions and the audience's questions today. So I first wanted to ask a question really for all of you, which is so we can go in order. But what do you see the impact of your company on dogs' health in 5 years? How do you see that impact playing out? So we could, I guess, do reverse order of the last question and start with Robin and go back down to Christina at the end.
Sure. So I think when you think about what Embark tests for, we're looking at germline DNA. So that's the DNA that your dog was born with and that they'll have their entire life. So what it's really great at telling you about is the presets, the nature of the dog, is the what is the breed, what are the susceptibilities to disease, and so on. So I think one of the things that Embark can really do, probably as well as anybody else, is give you a very good picture of what your what your dog's life is going to look like, based only on those presets. I think there's environment, and that will all come into play during the course of their lives. But I think we're in a really good space to think about the future and think about prevention and how you can best take care of your pets to give them the longest and happiest lives that are possible.
Thanks.
Excellent. So, from my perspective at PhytoCure, our biggest impact on canine health will be improving oncology care for dogs. So today, there really is a paucity of information when it comes to just understanding of canine cancer as well as treating it. So most of what we do today is based on these broad kind of histopathological characterizations of cancer and then treating with drugs from the mid 1950s, just to be realistic. And, most of these decisions are not truly evidence-based. I mean, how much, and are truly based on, 3 or 4 or 5 dogs from 1970 at Penn Vet, and one professor, treated 3 dogs. One lived 7 weeks, one lived 7 months, and one lived 7 years, and that's the median survival time that they'll quote. A lot of oncologists will just quote. What we're doing is we're bringing just a very regimented, not only genetic sequencing of the tumors, but all to truly understand the underlying, the underlying cause of the disease. But we're also bringing therapies from this century to bear in veterinary oncology. So in 5 years from now, I hope our contribution, and actually we've already seen it tremendously, is dramatically extending median survival time of dogs with cancer, as well as quality of life. And then if you ask me where in 10 years it should be, is hopefully we'll apply these newfound discoveries to humans with cancer. Thank you.
Great.
Are we going by the original order or the order that I introduced?
The backwards. It's Celine.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it is me. I think on our front, I think the impact of a drug that does extend lifespan or healthspan is doesn't need much expansion on why that would be impactful pet parents broadly. I think maybe the more interesting thing would be one of my meta goals is facilitating a broader industry working on drugs in this category and working on treating diseases in this category. So drugs that are intended to delay, prevent, dampen the effects of multiple age-related diseases. At the same time, diseases that today might seem very unrelated biologically, but that the aging thesis believes might be actually causatively linked via the ways by which we pathologically or our dogs pathologically age over time, and an increase in frailty and a loss in health-related quality of life. So that, if we really succeed and really prove our point that aging itself is druggable, maybe I would be sad, but also very excited to have very conservative pharma companies like Zoetis now becoming competitors. That would mean that there's an interest and an activity in the space that currently doesn't exist, from at least the pharmaceutical side.
Yep. Christina.
Hi, yeah. So to touch on all these wonderful responses for us, in 5 years, it's really turning cancer around in dogs from a death sentence to something more in certain tumor types that's like a chronic disease. That means catching it sooner, intervening sooner, and that every dog gets the drug that works for them. Today, we already have data, so it's no longer like a pipe dream. We are turning around hemangiosarcoma from a complete death sentence that many vets euthanize at the table to 25% of our patients are living over a year, which, for a new offering, we're already getting the ones that probably already failed many things. We're incredibly proud. These data were presented by Tufts, Dr. Cheryl London and her team, and we in the Veterinary Cancer Society meeting, and more to come there. But we're really excited. That's just one example. It's a very large unmet need. We're also crushing melanoma, pulmonary carcinoma, and transitional cell carcinoma bladder cancer with statistically significant life improvement, but quality of life, right? Because we only deliver oral capsules, again, to the right dog at the right time.
Awesome. Thank you all. I have one more kind of round robin question, and then we'll do individual ones. But I think this one is also highly relevant to all of the companies. And this is, is your company learning from analogs in the human space, human health, wellness, in relevant spaces, and what do you hope that your company will be able to do that will, in the future, inform human healthcare? So, do we want to let's do the backwards thing again? Start with Christina and end with Robin.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a perfect, the name of our company is One Health, right? We're part of that movement, as Ben was espousing. We are 100% lifting. We believe there's a vast unmet need for both humans and dogs, right, in cancer. We believe we have a data first, kind of, let's say, first in class approach, where phase one is we lift everything we can from the human world that we believe we can translate quickly, accessibly, right? Safety first, and build out the efficacy evidence to dogs. So we're entirely a translational medicine company, and we have brought 11 drugs, so from a space that had 1 to 11 in just a little over a couple of years. We're in V5 of our test, and we have a whole portfolio of sophisticated diagnostics. So not only we said we would do certain things, but we're doing it. We have 3,000 patients enrolled, and of those 3,000, we're already seeing signals correlating interesting, basically, context of cancer, biomarkers with treatments and outcomes. And some of those are what we expected, kind of concordant with the human journey. And some of those, because the dog, right, doesn't have a first line, an NCI guideline, we're able to, let's say, have some angles of flexibility that are very rigid for human interrogations, right, of combinations of therapies. So we don't have that. Ethics is, I want a PhD. I didn't finish in ethics, so it's very critical to everything we do and the patient's well-being. But beyond that, we are leveraging some of that, the regulatory architecture, the flexibility is there to figure out some major questions that are very hard. And everything we learn for the dog, then number one, we're looking for signals, what's working. And that then, because the premise is we work in that world where there's similarities across species on both sides of the leash, we like to say, we basically then can translate back to human. And we've already done that too. So we collaborated, this is public information, with ASI, the global pharma. They had a drug for metastatic breast cancer. They wanted to interrogate it. They were not happy with the animal models, what was out there, which is not sufficient. So we generated evidence in a tumor type that they were moving forward in humans, where we happen to have a lot of, comparative data. And they made a decision to take those data to the clinic. So basically, with those data, they made the decision to take the drug to the clinic. So there's a trial now at phase 2 at Mass General and a few other sites. So we actually, it's not a dream. We're actually helping already an unmet need in human cancer move forward with our canine cancer data. So we hope to do this 100x.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's really awesome, by the way. Also, I'm laughing so hard on both sides of the leash thing. I might steal that. I'll give credit where credit's due, but I'm definitely going to use it. I think on our end, so maybe a little bit of context on, why developing drugs for aging is so hard in people today. So I do fundamentally believe that, in 5 to 10 years, the aging industry will be not contrarian, right? So this idea that you can develop drugs intended to extend life in a health span, and that it's a thing that people are working on, similar to cancer, osteoarthritis, any other disease. And there's a lot of really good preclinical work showing and demonstrating the viability, at least, of that thesis and of that modality type. The big challenge in people is the feedback loop time, right? So if I, want to slow the rate of aging, to see, rate of aging in a person in a way that's statistically significant, that isn't, super bounded by noise, that isn't super bounded by just like, shitty like functional endpoints like 6-meter walk tests and whatnot. Because you have to wait a pretty long time. Like that's a 2-year at least clinical study, and that's like if you're lucky and you're in a kind of older population. Of course, drugs always work better, especially aging drugs in an earlier population. So then you're kind of like trying to trade off, money and time to efficacy endpoint versus, probability of the drug working at all. Additionally, anything that's just, for broad cause like aging, functional endpoints. If you want to actually look at lifespan, like good luck, right? Like that's a what? 30-year trial, 20-year trial, even if you're starting in relatively old patients. That's a super large N, super large N. Like a really good comparator here is statins. So things that are, for the prevention of, certain forms of heart attacks or reduced risk of certain forms of heart attacks. Those are some of the most expensive phase 3 clinical studies in the world. They can be hundreds of millions of dollars, and that's still easier, quote unquote, than an aging study, an interventional aging study. So really, my thought about what the field needs is a couple of things, and what we're partially hoping to help facilitate. One of it is just like better data, right? Like the ROI is there to go and do all of this shit and get your study approved and get your pivotal data. But if you have efficacy in a mouse and then you're like, I don't know if I, as a pharma company, want to put $1 billion or whatever it is, not to mention reputation because you're working on something weird with that, terrible of data. So, we're hoping that by showing things working in dogs, or at least mechanistically working in dogs, even if it's not the same drug, that might help improve the risk-reward ratio. And again, this is very similar to what One Health and Pedicure is doing, right? It's better data in a model that actually is a lot more representative. If you get efficacy, it's not 1-to-1, right? But it's much closer than God knows what mice are, right? So that's one thing we're really excited about. Another thing we're excited about is we're trying to work on figuring out ways to better quantify the aging process in general, and we can really do a lot more pivoting and iteration on things like this because the feedback loop is shorter. So you can see just kind of like the natural aging process in a dog from a quantifiable standpoint in approximately 6 months. Again, longer is always better, but like 6 months is a pretty damn reasonable time to like run a study. And so we are able to, with not that much money, be able to explore exploratory ways to quantify the aging process better, ways that are less noisy, ways that are more robust, that replicate better, that are easy to use, that don't have, variability or biases depending on if it's done by, in this dog or that dog, or, by this clinic or that clinic, or this clinic has lots of resources that this clinic doesn't. Like there's all these things that can cause a study to fail, even if a drug works, that you really want to extrapolate out as much as possible when you're trying to validate something. So I think that's going to be one of the things that if we can execute excellently, will not solve the human aging problem, but will at least make the equation look a little bit less terrible than it looks right now.
Exciting.
Very exciting. So One Health, PhytoCure, it has learned a lot from the human space. I mean, we truly are standing on the shoulders of giants from the human world, albeit 30 years later. I mean, just for reference, in 1989, the Nobel Prize in Medicine was won by Bishop and Varmus for the discovery of the oncogene, which provides, it's basically the genetic basis of cancer. And, now in 2022, this is becoming more commonplace in the treatment of dogs with cancer. Obviously, Embark was a pioneer in bringing genetics to our four-legged family members. And what One Health company is really doing is bringing what the common practice and standard practice is in humans into the veterinary market. And previously, this just wasn't done because of cost, availability of therapies, and honestly, there just wasn't a definable market in veterinary oncology. So what PhytoCure has done is, through partnerships and venture capital subsidization, and just a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, we've actually made this an affordable option for dogs with cancer. And we've made it also extraordinarily scalable. So kind of in a nutshell, phytocures, we've brought the best practices of human oncology and brought them to veterinary medicine. And there's a couple of advantages that we have in veterinary medicine that our human counterparts don't have. So as Christina mentioned earlier, there's 6 million dogs diagnosed with cancer each year. And this compares to about 1.6 million people. So just from a numbers standpoint, we have 4 times more patients developing cancer each year in the veterinary population. And that's, by the way, with million dogs versus the other thing, actually something that Celine had mentioned is really around disease acceleration. Some of these cancer types in people, might take several years until someone succumbs to their disease. But in certain cancer types in dogs, the median survival time untreated might be 14 days. So we get an answer really quickly. And I think the final advantage that we have is actually around combinations of therapies and treating almost purely on a biological standpoint, because the existing standard of care is relatively low in oncology, in veterinary medicine. And because of that, we can kind of leapfrog a lot of these, almost ingrained first, second, third line therapies that are part of the NCCN National Comprehensive Cancer Network guidelines on the human side, and almost treat these tumor types based on their biology rather than what was previously approved, and kind of working your way down a list of therapies. So there are these 3 primary advantages that we have on the veterinary side, and we hope to reapply these back on the human side. And a lot of the learnings really are around treatment based on novel biomarkers, as well as treating using combinations of therapies. And when I say combinations, I mean sometimes double and triple therapies. In human oncology, it's usually singlet therapies. There's a couple doublets, for V600 BRAF melanoma, for example. But in veterinary medicine, what's fascinating is we see highly conserved cancer genomics. So we see very similar mutations or kind of mutational subsets in the same cancer types. And sometimes they break down breed by breed. Sometimes they break down, based on UV dependent or UV independent. But what's fascinating is we can almost directly apply these lessons that we're learning from the dogs to humans. And as Christina mentioned, there have been some early successes, and there's a pretty long backlog of successes that the company has that have statistical significance, and I think will have been demonstrated already to help dogs, and I think will dramatically benefit people too.
Can I ask a good question? Sorry to be chaos mode on this panel, but the dogs having such a faster progression of cancer, is their cancer progressing more quickly, or is it because it's caught later, or some combination of both?
So it's probably a combination of both, but there certainly is accelerated disease progression. So, diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, I mentioned, a type of cancer that has like a 14-day median survival time in dogs. It's DLBCL, diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. Depending on which study with the low end that you quote, osteosarcoma might have a 3 to 6 to 9 to 12 month lifespan in a dog, and years in humans. Melanoma too. I mean, actually, I'll give you a personal example, unfortunately. So, I'll keep the personal examples out of it. But I think dogs are an excellent proxy, and we can learn quite a bit from their accelerated disease progression. So it's not I don't know if it corresponds with accelerated aging. The 7 dog years is 1 human year. I don't, and I'm sure, Celine, if you would kick me for saying that, I'm sure that's completely incorrect. That little
It
thing. But there are some translational lessons we can learn from both sides, as Christina says, from both sides of the leash.
Our chief AI scientist, who leads at Stanford, the Health AI, and looks at a lot of human clinical genomic data sets. What's remarkable, why he joined us, is this Dr. James Zoom, is because so I'm not saying the causality, but just more from a, big data overview, what would take 10 years to figure out in humans, 10 years, is months, sometimes sadly even weeks in dogs. So we can just see things so much faster. The why, I think, probably its own panel. And probably there's many inputs, but some have been surfaced.
Actually, and we can actually capture these data very importantly. When somebody dies in a human clinical trial, they often only find out, from the credit reporting bureaus that someone has died. The doctor doesn't even know. But in veterinary medicine, we actually, we're not constrained in the same way by HIPAA, and we have, longitudinal access to medical records. So from this kind of concept of clinical genomic database, it's very, very difficult to implement on the human side, but it's actually rather, I'm not going to say straightforward, but it's very doable on the, from basically birth to death, as well as historical pedigree. All of that, all of these data you can actually aggregate and make heads or tails of in animals that you could never do in humans. Robin, sorry to keep
no worries.
keep you.
That's interesting. Yeah. So I think Embark has been compared to 23andMe, and we think about 23andMe a little bit. Not I would say a lot, but a little bit. I certainly think about it because I used to work there. But there's an interesting analogy there because we both occupy a similar niche when it comes to prevention. Both of us, both Embark and 23andMe, can use the power of genome-wide association studies, GWAS, to identify genetic correlates of disease, and then come up with a prediction of how likely a person or an animal is to get that, to develop that over the course of their life. And 23andMe back in 2015 hit 1 million people, and just like Embark just hit 1 million dogs. And one thing that I think was really interesting about that time was that there was this flood of data coming. It was like where you would run a GWAS in 2013, 2014 and get one hit. Then you started getting dozens of hits, and now it's like hundreds or more hits. So you have all of these places in the genome seem to be involved in that disease for some reason. So and if you look at 23andMe's, and that made it to the product, like 23andMe's reports now, whereas they would have had a couple of markers predicting a trait back in 2013, 2014. Now they, like their Gout report, just Gout has 21,000 markers predicting it, which is kind of crazy. So we know that wave of data is coming, and we're building systems to accommodate it. And I think it's not a simple prediction. You get to a point where you have to create an algorithm, this machine that can come up with not only predictions of what will happen, but then also, recommendations as to what the best course of action is. And I think that's where Embark will have has a lot of potential. In terms of how we impact human health, there's a lot of similarities between, certain, when you think about a particular type of cancer, there's a lot of similarities between those cancers, or when it comes to many diseases, a lot of similarities between humans and dogs. At the pathway level, and it's quite possible that we'll find elements to genetic pathways that aren't so easily seen in humans, and then we'll be able to translate that or bring that back and make partnerships with human pharma companies to help identify new targets.
Great. We've actually gotten a couple of questions from the audience, and we're about a little over halfway through. So I'll start with those, and hopefully we'll continue to get more. Then you won't be subjected to my pre-planned questions. Yeah, the first one, and in particular the cancer ones. Obviously, there's a couple of people that might be chiming in, so you can decide who you want to talk. But the question is, in human genetics, many detrimental childhood diseases and cancers are caused by de novo variants. Are we seeing the same impact of de novo variants in dogs, or is it more complex? And so maybe there's a cancer question and then a other kind of mutations question, but maybe we'll start with cancer, and then Robin, maybe you can help chime in on the other diseases?
So,
Could you
oh,
say it again, the question? I'm sorry, it broke out for me.
In human genetics, many detrimental childhood diseases and cancers are caused by de novo variants. Are we seeing the same impact of de novo variants in dogs, or is it different?
Ben, you want to take this one?
sure, happy to take it. So I am a bit out of training. I have not looked at the data set lately, but I believe when you look at canine cancer, it probably has a lot more similarities to human pediatric cancer than the majority of um, adult cancer types that you see. So a lot of these are, there's quite a bit of, let's say, breed predispositions. For example, we'll see, entire litters of golden retrievers that will have, the same mutation with the same, with the same B cell lymphoma. So, there's certainly this very strong hereditary and kind of breed predispositions that we're seeing. That being said, if white, white pit bulls living in New Mexico, we also see, a pretty large incidence of UV-dependent melanoma. So, in general, I think the cancer types that we're seeing in dogs are far more similar to what we see in human children. And I think there's actually still quite a bit of learning to do here. So we have our theories, but I still think there's quite a bit of validation to be done.
I think osteosarcoma is the one that there's a lot of data on. So bone cancer, children and dogs, and that's probably where there's a lot of information. And I think some folks from our scientific advisory board did do a study observing, right, the qualities of bone osteosarcoma, bone cancer in children and dogs, and how that tumor type in dogs more closely resembles the pediatric experience.
Yep.
Yeah.
And one thing to add is, in terms of the de novo variants, I mean, like I said, we'll see litters with the same cancer type, with the same mutation. So is that a de novo variant? Probably not. I'm sure if we went back in history and looked at the siblings of the parents, would we also see similar kind of germline mutations? My guess is we probably would. But like I said, there's still a lot of studying to be done. We're still kind of we're not in the millions yet, but as we get there, I think we'll know a lot more.
Yep. Robin, did you want to jump in on a more broad swath of diseases and the impacts of de novo variants versus more common variants?
Yeah, I don't know if I had too much to add. I think I would just say that the jury is really still out when it comes to dogs because there's not enough data yet, and it's unclear whether. I mean, you'd think on some level that it would be the same with humans, but when you look at the population structure of dogs, it's so different, and it's just islands of rather than a continuous gradient as it is with humans, and so you might see different patterns emerge.
Great, thanks. So a second question from the audience. Do you use nutritional food and supplement treatment plans and therapies for cancer, or only pharmaceutical? What are the pros and cons of each approach? And the question is about cancer, so maybe we should start there, but I think that maybe there's an opportunity for others to jump in too, more broadly after.
So I think nutrition actually plays a really important role in canine cancer. That being said, we are, the jury is very much still out on that. We don't know what exactly that role is. From the phytocure side of things, we do focus primarily on the pharmaceutical interventions and outcomes. That being said, we have seen wondrous cases on both sides of the fence where some of these keto diets or raw vegan. I mean, we've seen all kinds of things, and we actually from a data standpoint in the clinical genomic database, we actually record all of these variables. But I don't think we can draw any conclusions about nutrition yet. And also I'm far from a nutritionist. But like I said, I believe there is great value there. But yeah, PhytoCure from the platform standpoint focuses on the pharmaceutical angle. The interesting opportunity there is that unlike humans, you can control what a dog eats. You know, my father happens to be a cardiologist, and no matter how many times he would tell people, you know, don't have a donut every morning for breakfast, or, you know, don't eat at this particular fast food restaurant 3 times a day for all your meals, inevitably they'd come back 2 years later, you know, with congestion or a heart attack, and of course they were eating that same food. But in veterinary medicine, we actually have that opportunity to intervene and, you know, and control what these dogs are eating. Granted, you know, everyone sneaks scraps of their dogs every once in a while, but from the learning standpoint, I think there is quite an opportunity there on the nutrition side.
We had some of the fanciest donuts I've ever seen at the office this morning. I don't know who brought them. But,
Oh, maybe just to add a couple of things there. So how we look at cancer, really a multifactorial disease, right? Probably there's millions of cancers, not the cancer, but definitely genetics, immune system, nutrition, environment, all of these things truly do play a role. Where we honed in, remember, because we feel urgency to turn this disease around. So where we hone in is what has already been, let's say, proven, de-risked, validated in humans, and lift back to the dog. Because we've taken this approach, again, with that urgency of at least improving the toolbox, closing the knowledge gap with humans, which, you know, has decades and billions, gazillions of R&D behind it, we're leaning on specifically a precision medicine toolbox and targeted therapy. So Ben is correct. We lean, you know, right on the drug side. However, in that, I want to make one thing clear, which is our focus is beyond chemo and radiation because of the impact on the immune system. And right, so they zap the good, the bad, everything underneath. So we are leaning towards that directionality of the right drug for the right dog at the right time, minimizing toxicity. So we've gotten very good. I mean, I'm honored and blessed to have our SAB who has helped us on this. We're figuring out toxicity of these drugs in a way that I think that will be a contribution for humans. Because when we start to see a side effect, we do drug holidays, and we're still seeing the anti-tumor effect continue. This is amazing. And again, in the human world, it's so much more rigid. It's very hard to do these things. So we're able to do that. So we're very mindful. Remember, that's one thing of the, you know, in the canine world versus humans is quality of life matters a lot. So everything we do has to have that as a center, like really as, you know, like almost an endpoint, right? So to that end, we're mindful. I would love to, you know, I'm very curious about not just the nutrition, but we have wonderful folks that are studying different modalities in Chinese medicine and all sorts of tools. I love it, but we chose this one, right? This one area where we can feel good, we can feel, right? This is the best de-risked, right, approach with the quality of the patient's life and their family and their caretakers in mind.
Great. And Celine, I know that Loyal's focused on pharmaceutical interventions, but how do you look at the diets as well, or how you know, are you doing any thinking in the food and supplement realm as you're running the studies that you're doing now?
No, so we explored going down a supplement path or the food path early on in Loyal, but decided against it, specifically not for any scientific reason, but actually because the first question we always get is like, oh, is it a supplement? When we talk about what we're doing, and one of the kind of core goals of Loyal is to prove the point that you can have a drug that is intended for treating aging itself, and we were worried that a supplement might dilute that narrative to a general public. And as far as from a development standpoint, any drug that gets approved for basically anything, but especially something that's preventative and has a high safety bar like an AD drug would, has to work regardless of the diet that the patient is on. Although obviously, certain diets may or may not augment that. I mean, I think the classical study is the Purina study in the late 90s, where they did 25% caloric restriction of Labradors and showed an approximate 2-year lifespan extension and an approximate, not statistically significant, delay of, I believe, all-cause cancer and osteoarthritis in those dogs. So, but pet parents really don't want to not feed their dogs. I think there was a very famous drug flop that was a weight loss drug for dogs. So we're not really going down that path in general.
Yep. Yeah, and then Robin, of course, Embark is looking at genetic predispositions that the dogs are born with prior often to developing the illness. So what do you see as the balance there with pharmaceutical approaches and food supplements and such?
Yeah, I think when you're thinking about longevity more broadly, there's a lot of opportunities to intervene, with diet, with supplements, behavior modification, and whatnot. And I think those are that gene by environment interaction is something that we're really interested in at Embark. And I think that we have a really great ability to do those types of studies with our engaged user base. So I think you'll see that in the future. Like for example, one of the let's say there's a genetic signature or like some kind of algorithm that could predict whether a dog would respond to a particular diet or not. Those are the types of things that we could discover, and those are just one example.
Great. So I'll give another shout out to the audience that if you want to get your.
Mind if I jump in real quick with just
right
another perspective coming less from maybe the genetic standpoint, but more from the kind of understanding where things are at any given time. So I think for the nutritional question is really interesting in dogs, and oftentimes the measurements are very gross. At best, you're getting these very periodic data points when a dog shows up at their veterinary hospital, and maybe even then some of those are falling through. But I think in the future we will be seeing a lot more of these continuous metabolic monitoring platforms that allow us to continually assess, potentially every second or so, what is happening inside an animal's body, whether it's a human or a dog, and to truly understand what's going on from the nutritional plane. I think will dramatically affect our understanding of cancer as well as aging and just a bunch of other health and disease states. So Robin had brought up, gout, for example. So we know there's a bunch of genetic, as you mentioned, 23,000, was that the number? 23,000 plus?
21, yeah, but yeah.
21,000, excuse me. Genetic predispositions for gout in humans. But what's fascinating is now, we're actually at the point where you can use a very inexpensive continuous metabolic monitor to continuously monitor glucose, uric acid, and actually, strangely enough, alcohol consumption to understand not only someone's propensity for having a gout flare-up, but actually, what are their triggers and what's actually in ways to prevent for example, gout, ways to actually prevent flare-ups. So really interesting kind of additional granularity, I think, will be coming onto the scene to allow us to better understand not only the genetic predispositions, but also how these nutritional kind of exogenous environmental nutritional factors affect, actually affect our animals and actually our own health. Sorry, that's a bit of a side, but I think I find that entire sector very interesting, and it'll be coming to animals soon, I believe.
Yeah, thanks for that perspective. So yeah, I'm gonna shout out to the audience. We have about 10 minutes left, so if you want to get a question answered, please ask away soon. Ben, as the veterinarian on the panel, I was curious, what would your advice be in general to somebody who's trying to make improvements in veterinary medicine, but coming from the biotech world, the tech world, and trying to bring something in. How do you make that successful with veterinarians?
So I just wanted one quick correction, and I'll be happy to answer. So I went to veterinary school. I did 3.5 years of veterinary school. However, I've not graduated yet. So I am not embarrassingly, I'm not a veterinarian. I ended up,
You're a dropout like a true founder.
yeah, a habitual dropout, unfortunately. Actually, just as an aside, the first time I dropped out was I told my parents I want to try out for the Olympic team. My parents said, that's crazy. That's such a waste of time. The Olympics have been there for 2,000 years. You can try anytime. Just graduate school and you can do whatever you want. And embarrassingly, I did it, and embarrassingly, that one paid off, and hopefully this will pay off again. So in terms of, kind of eliciting change in the veterinary market, it happens to be very difficult. There's, I think veterinary medicine is an incredibly overworked, kind of underappreciated field. And there's just not that much time that veterinarians seem to have to learn new modalities and to, really get caught up on what's next and improve their practice. I mean, there are some great continuing education opportunities out there, both in person as well as online these days. But it is very hard to elicit change in veterinary medicine, especially, when you talk about certain very well entrenched specialties, where I'd say there's people who have a vested interest in keeping things the way that they always have been for whatever reason. And it's probably harder than changing a veterinarian's mind is probably harder, even with overwhelming data, is probably harder than anything else I've ever tried. So it's a momentous task, but obviously, Embark, Loyal, and hopefully One Health Company will be able to kind of actually already have in many ways surmounted this pretty big obstacle.
Yeah, with that, actually, Christina, do you want to tell the other side of the story of, from an entrepreneur, like what was that journey like of becoming this category creator and getting this successfully adopted in the veterinary market so that you're having the impact you want on dogs? What were some of the key learnings and wins along the way?
Oh my God, so many. First, I really have to come back to the mission aspect pretty periodically because it is so hard. And I'm not even going to pretend it's not, right? To get into the clinic, to deliver care at the clinic, to make sure the patient, like the whole arc, and then getting the data out, analyzing it, a very unusual team, right? With folks like MD PhDs from human oncology, veterinary world, engineers, it's like so different. So I think really being able to lean into the force of like the mission for me is the only way, because otherwise you give up. Okay, so that's number one. So I'm kind of determined that knows this. Like when something's in my head, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Like I don't care who's with me. So that also creates a momentum. And so I think going to Y Combinator for me personally, because I was a first time founder. And so that was very important community for me. I probably benefited more from like the approach. Rather, the fundraising was great at the end, and we did really well. But actually, I really loved was the approach, and I still watch videos and talks. I love it. I love the Fault Alive. You know what I mean? I love. For me, it really worked. I know it's not for everyone, but for me, it was very meaningful, and I basically definitely a big ROI. So that was very critical for us. But definitely, I'm from Brazil, as I mentioned in the beginning. A woman in bio is already such a weird thing. Nothing fits. And then we attract folks that are really different in their thinking, and it's just not the box. And then you go and you're pitching or presenting to like the more, format, and you're like so different that, you win some, you lose some. You have to have some faith, I guess. Sorry to talk like that, but it really is that, okay, if you didn't really connect or that didn't work, oh my God, that was just terrible pitch or whatever, that, maybe there's just a reason, and you then find who you connect with. For sure, if I didn't feel like, I think every founder doing something so new, cross species. I mean, Celine is doing it too. It's really like, it's out there. Okay. Even I'm sitting here in Palo Alto, it's out there here. So courage is really important, which is part of what I'm saying. Courage is a courage, from French, it's the heart. So that's what I mean. Like it's more than mental. There's another thing that's got to push you. Otherwise, it can feel very hard. And then obviously there are moments that you're elated. We just presented, not did a poster, presented at AACR, which is the American Association for Cancer Research. That's like, it was a big win for us, for me personally, maybe. But so you have to lean in and make sure the team also feels those good ebullient moments, because the next day you're going to be down for one reason, and so it goes with the flow. So some like, let's say, framework that a person can lean into is super key. I don't know if that answered. Was a bit long-winded, but feels important to transmit if other folks are founders here or want to be founders.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. So I think we just have time for one more question, and so I'm going to make it maybe a little extra spicy. But Robin, Embark, of course, we are looking at differences fundamentally between dogs. Genetic differences between dogs. And Celine, I think you're approaching this from what are universal or closer to universal learnings that we can actually share with lots of dogs, and what are the benefits and the drawbacks of your approach? How for each of you, I guess Celine, if you want to start. I think you each have about 1 minute though, so.
Well, I can talk very fast. Yeah, I mean, I think so. The way I think about this is it's where you're looking in the timeline, right? So there's a lot of things that you guys are looking at in terms of the specificities. One good example is, why do Goldens get some aspects of, cancer at a higher rate than most other breeds? Or why do, some German Shepherds get hip dysplasia and some don't? And that is incredibly, incredibly beneficial to those subsets of the dogs, and teaches us a lot about biology in general. I think it's very useful at a later stage of the disease. So it's really great for anything interventional, which is an absolute key step to treating disease, right? Like I look at things from a more preventative standpoint, that's great, but is far from sufficient for a multitude of reasons that I'd go into if I had longer in a minute. The way I'm looking at things is different but complementary, insofar that it's okay, like, if we look at a healthy organism now, what are the core drivers of increase in frailty, an increase in the probability that the dog is going to have issues in the future, right? And that's important, because if you're developing an aging drug, we don't want an aging drug that's just for German Shepherds who may or may not get hip dysplasia, that's just for Goldens that may or may not get like this type of cancer, but not that type of, like, it just wouldn't work from a market standpoint. But it also means that it's less likely to be broadly effective to the patient population that's likely to get that disease in the first place. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but basically it's like two very different ways to cut the pie, and it's important that we do both, because otherwise we're going to miss broad swaths of the population that are, driven or not driven by, or more or less likely to have certain diseases or not have certain diseases.
I have a quick question. I have a quick response. We are looking for the exceptional responder. We want that N of 1, and then we want to find more. We know it's not going to be the N of 1, but we want to then find, Fluffy, who was expected to live 40 days and is out 2 years. We want to find what characteristics drove that, and then find it in population health. So it goes from the very N of 1 broader.
Yeah, I think Celine's absolutely right. You have to look at both, because if you think about 1 million dogs and you start slicing it 350 breeds, and then you start slicing it by disease, you have very, very small data sets. I mean, the good news is that because dogs are so within breeds so similar genetically, you may only need a small sample size, so that's good. But I think that when you think about mixed breed dogs, you think about the larger world, like you have to look broadly as well. So I think we're doing both at Embark.
Great. Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you to all the panelists, to Celine and Christina and Ben and Robin for sharing your expertise and your time with us. It was a great discussion. Thanks.
Thank you for having us.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you again, Ryan, and to all of our panelists, Christina, Benjamin, Celine, and Robin, for a fantastic discussion.
Thank you, John.
All right. So,
oh, go ahead.
What's that?
You do it, John.
Oh yeah, I've got a few takeaways for everyone. So, yeah, I want to thank all of our amazing speakers and then share some wrap up comments. Ryan, is there anything you want to add before I do so?
I wanted to thank everybody who's showing up. You know, the participation that we've seen, it's just incredible, as well as, of course, all of the speakers, the panelists, and a bunch of people at Embark and elsewhere who helped put this together and make it what it is. So really exciting first day, and looking forward to tomorrow myself. I hope I didn't steal too much of your thunder.
No, not at all. That's great. I was going to do the same thing. There's a whole team at Embark behind this event that we're really grateful for everyone's hard work. And Ryan, you're bookending us today. You gave us a great kickoff this morning, and now kind of closing it out with our first panel and our last session of the day. So I have a few notes for all of our viewers and attendees. First is that we want to invite everyone to share your top takeaway from all of today's presentations across any of the lectures and speakers you heard by visiting the lobby and clicking on the Embark booth, and then click on the booth rep chat button on the top left, and you can post on the forum the one big thing you've learned today. All conference attendees can see this content, and you can use the chat feature to network with one another by clicking the name of any interesting post you see and then sending them a message. We've had over 1,000 unique attendees today from all over the world and across numerous different fields, from breeders to veterinarians and researchers. So we invite and encourage everyone to take advantage of this great opportunity to network and collaborate with one another. And if you choose to do so, we'd love it if you want to post on social media as well, any big takeaways you've had from the day. Please just use the hashtag Canine Health Summit, and feel free to share links to today's content as well. For me, the big takeaways I had, Ryan, I don't know if you want to add anything to this, but the big takeaways I had was, first, for veterinarians, adding genetic screening to patient wellness protocols provides additional insights to inform proactive clinical care plans. For breeders, genetic health testing with COI measurements helps inform optimal breeding pairs and supports the long-term health of breeding lines. And lastly, probably the biggest thing I heard is that research is making a huge difference in the effort to improve the health of dogs. And as we heard from many of our speakers, everyone here can support canine health research by using genetic testing on your dogs and completing annual health surveys to inform ongoing research. So Ryan, did I miss anything? Anything for you?
No, just that I'm going to need to find the sessions I missed because we were doing side-by-side ones, and catch up on those as well. Awesome.
All right, great. Well, a few just logistics items for everyone before we close out. The summit site will remain open all evening through the end of the day tomorrow, so you're free to use any of its features at any time. You don't have to log off or exit from your browser. You can simply leave the window open. Or if you do want to close it, you don't have to log out. You can just put the link in again tomorrow. And in some cases, people might be asked to register again. That shouldn't happen, but if it does, go ahead and register again. It won't cause any issues. Complete recordings of all presentations from today as well as tomorrow will be available after the summit is over by visiting embarkvet.com. And let's see, what else? Lastly, I'd be remiss if I didn't highlight our current leaderboard on the scavenger hunt. In first place, we have Jody London with 13,000 points, amazingly, and then a number of people right behind with 12,800. It looks like a 9-way tie for second place. So keep on using that scavenger hunt, and the contest stays open through tomorrow. So with that, thank you again very much for a great first day of our Embark Canine Health Summit. As you know, Embark's mission is to improve the health and well-being of dogs the world over, and all of you are supporting this important work through your participation here today. So have a great evening, and we'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern.